Hello and welcome to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name is Dylan Jackson. Today I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, how you doing today?
Phenomenal, to say the least. Our favorite team pulled off a pretty cool comeback win. I think it was the tied for second biggest comeback win in the Panthers franchise history. So that was really cool to see. Didn't think it would happen, and hopefully we can continue that momentum this week.
Yeah, my thoughts were skewed pretty negatively after the first 20 minutes of that game. I think it was, 17-0, Panthers down, obviously, two Bryce Young turnovers, neither of which looked very good, but our guy, Xavier Legette, kind of helped us out of that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him credit. I'm kind of known as the Liget hater, I guess, in the 2 point conversion universe, but he played phenomenal. The touchdown catch was a very good hands catch, something that he struggled with his rookie season, but he locked that one in. He had the exact same play in Jacksonville where he didn't get both feet in bounds on the corner route, but he got both feet down this time. And on every single Rico Dowdle run, by the way, what a day for Rico Dowdle, the Panthers' backup running back. But every single big run, Liget had like a bone-shattering block on some of the DBs, and it sprung Dowdle for like 50, 40, 30-yard gains pretty consistently. So huge game from him, and I got to give him props. He played his ass off.
Yeah, that downfield blocking specifically was, I think, arguably. I mean, other than the touchdown catch, it was just super impressive how consistent he was, and yeah, I think that's kind of the aspect that the Carolina Panthers receiving room has missed a lot because T Mac isn't the best blocker in the world. Renfro obviously not. David Moore is okay, but he's out. So they really missed a guy who could, you could run behind as a receiver and kind of mix up personnel packages. You don't have to have multiple tight ends to run behind. So I'm super happy for him after a really, really rough start to the year, both from a usage perspective and from obviously a production standpoint too. But we have a packed show today. We're going to talk about some of the younger NFL quarterbacks throughout the league, if whether we're buying or selling, what they've done so far this year, and kind of their careers as a whole. We're going to talk about a new segment. It's so over, or we're so back. Just some teams that lost or won. That it could have been a pivotal moment in the season for them. Obviously, our games of the week for week 6, and then our takes as well. So we have a lot to get through. And we're going to start off with buying or selling these young quarterbacks. We're going to start with Dylan Gabriel, the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback. He got his first start in London against Brian Flores and the Minnesota Vikings. Dylan Gabriel went 19 for 33, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns. What did you make of his first NFL start, and are you buying or selling what you saw?
I thought he was as impressive as you could be against a Brian Flores defense in your first start. At the beginning of the year, Caleb Williams had his first game this year against a Flores defense, and I want to say Gabriel looked much better. Like he wasn't as rushed as Caleb Williams was outside of that first drive where Williams was pretty surgical. Um, I have selling written down here in the notes, but I think I'm going to hold just because that's a pretty imposing first defense you're going to go against. Gabriel didn't really impress me in terms of pushing the ball down the field. A lot of underneath stuff. I think they operate, or I think Gabriel specifically operated pretty well within like the goal to go scenarios. Like he hit Fannin and I think Njoku in the back of the end zone on one of them. And I thought he was pretty accurate there, but it was more of what I suspected when he came out of college. Not somebody that can push the ball down the field, get guys like Isaiah Bond, Jerry Jeudy involved in like intermediate and deep passes. I think he was just a fine like check down guy, system operator. And long term, I'm definitely selling that kind of player because the Browns infrastructure isn't that good. I know the rookies have all performed very, very well, but I think you still need an elevator at QB to be successful. What like as the Browns are constructed right now, but for his very first start, I guess I'll hold it. But like I said, down the line, I think I'm going to sell Dylan Gabriel's stock. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Shador Sanders at some point near the end of the year.
Yeah, so this is a team that has already traded Joe Flacco off the heels of that 21-17 loss in London. So Their quarterback room right now only consists of Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders, which is interesting to me as most teams kind of prefer to have some sort of veteran in the locker room. Obviously, they feel differently. I'm going to sell. This is kind of what I expected Dylan Gabriel to be in that Vikings game. I think my pre-game take, if you will, towards the end of last week's podcast was I thought that the Cleveland Browns would win, and I thought that Dylan Gabriel would do a pretty good job in mitigating the effects that Brian Flores and his defense could have just through the quick game, through the running game. Quinshawn Judkins looked incredible in this game 23 carries, 110 yards. Should have had an incredibly long touchdown if it wasn't for a holding call. But yeah, I just think that it's unsustainable the way that Dylan Gabriel plays. I think it's fine for a potential backup quarterback, which is what I kind of projected Dylan Gabriel to be. But um, I see a lot of people hyping up, and I know that it's his first start. I know that he's, pretty good considering it was a very stout defense that he went up against. But he didn't really do anything that I thought he wasn't capable of, right? It was all things that, I thought was in his repertoire, all skills that I thought he was capable of. And I think Kevin Stefanski did a really good job scheming the offense to kind of maximize those strengths. But yeah, I'm going to sell here. I'm not quite sure I'm a believer in the talent. Now, Dylan Gabriel could come out against the Steelers on Sunday, and, you could maybe pull out a win. I kind of don't expect that to be the case, but yeah, we'll see. I'm selling for now, though.
That Vikings team was also pretty battered with injuries, most of them being on offense, but still, I think that game was closer, or it appeared closer than it actually was. You had convinced me that the Browns were going to win mainly because of those injuries, and I'm kind of disappointed that they weren't able to pull it off as it pertains to our pick'ems at the 2 point conversion. But like you're saying, Gabriel, he just did what we expected of him, and if he elevates beyond that, like that's awesome for the Browns. That would be another addition to pretty stellar rookie class so far, right? Between Judkins, Harold Fannin, the tight end, Carson Swessinger, the linebackers playing well. Isaiah Bond has been active in their receiving room with Cedric Tillman hurt. So it would be another good addition to that rookie class, but I just don't know how much more Dylan Gabriel has in him. But again, one start. So we'll have to see like halfway through the season or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the advanced numbers here, I think it goes to show like what kind of performance it was. Even though he was turnover averse, even though he scored 2 touchdowns, Dylan Gabriel still carried a negative 6.9 EPA in week 5 against the Vikings. So it's not like he was stellar, even though he was doing what he was asked in the offense. And I kind of think that was an impressive performance considering that skill set that he brings. So, I think that he'll be a respectable quarterback in 2025 that can start however many games you need to. I don't think he's going to be able to fend off Shador Sanders forever, especially if this Browns team continues to lose. But I will say just one point before we leave Dylan Gabriel. This Browns rookie class is incredible. Mason Graham looks like a pretty big hit. Obviously, Carson Swessinger, the linebacker out of UCLA, I think he was the first pick of the second round. He looks really, really good. Honestly, like their best rookie, probably. Obviously, Quinshawn Judkins, who I talked about. Dylan Sampson looks pretty good. And then, you're getting this type of contribution from Gabriel being a third round quarterback. I still think that's solid value considering. And then we'll see what Shador Sanders does as well.
I don't know if I'm ready to throw it in the ring with the Saints 2017 draft, which to me is probably the best ever. But this is one of the best in recent years, and like in terms of immediate return from the rookies. Like the reason that the Browns have been in close games has been the rookies this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and the contributions from those two defensive guys in the first 2 rounds, especially, I was pretty skeptical of the Browns' defense after last year. They kind of regressed heavily, but this year they look like every bit of the elite unit that they've been in years past, and I think it's in part because of what Mason Graham and Carson Swessinger have done so far.
Yeah, who would have thought giving Miles Garrett some help would have turned the defense around, right?
Yeah, yeah. So let's move on to the second quarterback that we have. It is Michael Penix. I think this is going to be a little bit longer of a conversation as we just have more of a sample of Michael Penix so far. But what have been your thoughts on Penix through, I think it's like 8 or 9 games of him starting so far?
So the concerns that I had in his rookie year, kind of spraying throws, being like a one speed thrower, kind of like loading up and firing on a lot of throws. I haven't really been, or those concerns really haven't been sated through 4 weeks. They had a bye week last week, so they played the first 4 weeks so far. I know he looked good in week one against Tampa. I know they played pretty well against Washington with an injured Washington team. Jaden Daniels didn't play in that game, but the two games in between those games, so Minnesota and Carolina, I thought Penix just wasn't performing super well. They win against Minnesota. I think that was a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, but that was a 15-6 win, only field goals. The stuff that happened down the field was like a big Bijan performance. And so far, I think he's been better in terms of seeing the field, but the sprays are still there. And that does give me concern. I think long term, if you can't kind of I don't know how to put this because he has the arm to get the ball there. It's just a lot of times it's over the head or in the dirt or something like that. And I don't want to say he's inaccurate already, but I think I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff I saw last year, especially in that Panthers game, which it might be an anomaly. That was just a terrible game for him. But I think I'm going to sell Penix early in this season. He just hasn't really impressed me a ton. And they have the weapons at every level on that offense to do it. I know the offensive line's been not as healthy as it was last year, but when you have guys like Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts is playing pretty well. I think you should be able to push the ball downfield consistently and effectively. And I just can't get some of the sprays and inconsistencies out of my mind. And I think the last thing I'll say is the most concerning part is the over the middle of the field stuff. It's sometimes he doesn't even see the middle of the field, which I think for somebody as with as strong an arm as Penix has, that should be what you should be taking advantage of.
Yeah, it's weird. The types of throws that offensive coordinator Zach Robinson is kind of, I guess, pigeonholing him into. Here, I'm going to hold on Michael Penix. I think the biggest thing coming out of college is that he was going to be sort of this gunslinger, somebody that's going to stretch the field with his arm. He really hasn't done that a whole lot. It's a lot of, he's been pretty rhythmic, throwing, in routine. He's, pretty good footwork, I would say. But I think the offense is very, very poor design, which sucks because I think everybody was excited about what Zach Robinson could have been for this Falcons team as a head play caller. But it's not what I expected from Michael Penix in the NFL. And we talk about runway athletes like Xavier Legette kind of needing a runway to get going, not somebody that's shifty. I think Michael Penix is kind of a runway thrower a little bit, where he just requires a little bit more clean of a pocket than most quarterbacks do in the NFL. If one kind of facet of the pocket is off, things can kind of deteriorate from there. And I think that's a big reason as to why you see a lot of the sprays and erratic throws that you get from Michael Penix. So far this year, under pressure, he has a completion percentage of 49%. That's 11% lower than the expected rate. He's good at kind of mitigating pressure. He's been pressured 44 times, sacked 5 times off of those reps. One thing that I will say though is when he is pressured, things just kind of it deteriorates. It just the field closes for him in a way that it doesn't for most quarterbacks that are pretty mobile. And I think Michael Penix ran a pretty quick 40-yard dash, if I remember correctly. But he's just not all that great if things aren't ideal conditions in the pocket.
I don't want to speculate as to why that is because this is a guy that had 4 consecutive season-ending injuries in college. But I think that might play a role, right? To where if you've dealt with such extreme injuries, not seeing a perfect picture might muddy things really quick, especially when he is a capable enough athlete to do it. And I think that's part of the reason why I guess I've been disappointed in Penix so far this season. I think he's capable of being more. I think the Falcons' offense can be more, but we're just going to have to see it from him. As much as Zach Robinson, I think, is holding the offense back with forcing a lot of stuff outside the numbers, I think Penix's play under pressure, like you're talking about, is also holding not just the offense, but himself back because he's capable of making the plays. He just has to do it at a more consistent rate.
And like just to hammer the point on Zach Robinson a little bit, I posted a graphic to Twitter the other day based on screen efficiency. X-axis was screens run, and then the y-axis was EPA per screen. The Atlanta Falcons have only run 9 screens so far this season, and they have the
That
worst
is insane
efficiency.
to me,
Yeah,
considering the skill position players they have.
they have Bijan Robinson, much better than Brian Robinson. They have Darnell Mooney. They have Ray McLeod, who was basically a screen merchant at Clemson. Um, and they have the worst efficiency on those screens as well. So only the Indianapolis Colts, believe it or not, have run less screens than the Atlanta Falcons. So just shocking to me considering the level of talent that this team has in the skill positions. But I just think that the design of the offense leaves a lot to be desired. Like most of, if not all of the reps that Michael Penix gets is in pistol formation, which just it makes it tougher on the quarterback, not having those deeper play action plays, or it essentially eliminates a lot of the hesitation that defenders would have on play action reps, and it's not quite as deep as it would be standard shotgun, but it's just a weird design. I kind of thought it would go away when this team pivoted from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix, but it really hasn't, and it's one of the more unique offenses in the NFL, and I don't necessarily think it's in a good way.
Yeah, it's kind of the worst of both worlds when you aren't running quick game at a very high level of efficiency, right? I think Kirk Cousins was good at that, but when you have somebody that's probably a better athlete at this point in Penix, I think you should be testing the middle of the field, testing downfield, and staying in the pistol just isn't going to do that. Like you can't get the play action looks, you can't get the extra time that Penix might need if he took a drop back from the shotgun, right? So if Zach Robinson can't change his, I guess, doctrine in terms of how their offense should be run, I think it's going to be very hard for this Atlanta team to continue to. I don't want to say perform at a high level because they haven't so far, but like win games that they should be winning, I guess is how I'd put it.
One more quick thing, Michael Penix. I kind of thought that this would be his bread and butter coming into the league, but on intermediate throws, which is air yards of 10 to 19 yards, Michael Penix ranks 31st in total EPAs at negative 16.9. The only 2 quarterbacks worse than him so far this year are Jake Browning, who's last, and Geno Smith, who's been a pretty big disaster so far this year. So he's really struggling on those throws, which is just weird because they have one of those, like, I would say, best intermediate targets in the NFL with Drake London, and I think Michael Pitts is, I think Pitts is probably one of the better tight ends in that area of the field as well. So it's just really weird, the offense as a whole. And, I'm going to hold for now. Maybe this team makes a change at play caller in the near future or in 2026, but I'm not really ready to say that I'm out on Michael Penix so far. But with that, we can move to the next quarterback that we're going to talk about, Jaxson Dart. So Jaxson Dart comes in. He plays the LA Chargers at MetLife 2 weeks ago, gets a win 21-18. He goes to New Orleans this past week. Things do not quite go as well. What are your thoughts on Jaxson Dart through 2 weeks?
Well, first of all, I want to say that both of us got that pick right, that the Saints would win. Give you like a virtual fist bump there. Jaxson Dart, I think I'm going to sell on being like immediate franchise changer. I don't know if that was ever the expectation, but when you win your first game, especially against like a tough team, I think expectations are going to be thrust upon you. But like Dylan Gabriel, we're really new into the Jaxson Dart era. And so I don't know if I'm ready to sell on him completely. So I guess I'll hold. But I think some of the things that I had concerns with coming out of Ole Miss showed up a bit on Sunday in the Superdome. A lot of the stuff downfield, it seems like he would just kind of throw to the area, and the receiver wouldn't make the play like he did at Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin schemed. Who was he? Trey Harris, 15 yards of separation. You're not going to get that in the NFL consistently. And I thought a lot of the decisions in terms of throwing just really over the middle of the field, down the field, weren't the best. I feel like he can pull and run quicker, which is weird because he already pulls and runs quite a bit. But I think there are a lot of instances where he can use his athleticism a bit more. Just a little bit disappointed, to be honest. The Saints team is not a great defensive team. I know they're kind of humming on offense, but I feel like you should be able to put forth a better battle against the Saints defense. But ultimately, the Saints got the win there, and I feel like Dart is going to continue to progress. We also have to mention that they don't have Malik Neighbors for the rest of the year, and that's really tough for a young quarterback. But I was just a bit disappointed in this game.
You mentioned the kind of deep 20-plus air yard throws. Jaxson Dart has thrown 8 of those in 2 games, which is kind of crazy. There are some NFL quarterbacks who have started every game so far this year that have not eclipsed 8 attempts of 20-plus air yards. On those attempts, Jaxson Dart is 0 for 8, so he has not completed one yet. That will probably change in the near future, but it's really unfortunate that this team lost Malik Neighbors. So now it's a pretty inefficient run game, I would say, that this Giants team has. I don't think it's necessarily the running back's fault here. This O-line is one of the worst in the league. You have a receiver room that doesn't have the top targets. So it's basically Darius Slayton, who I think got hurt on Sunday. It's Wan'Dale Robinson. It's like Jalen Hyatt, I think. I don't even know if he's in the receiver rotation, but it's pretty rough for this Giants team. I'm looking at the stats right now of the box score against New Orleans, and the leading receiver on this team was Daniel Bellinger with 4 receptions for 52 yards. So that kind of tells you the state of the New York Giants pass catchers right now. After Bellinger, it was Cam Scatterbo and Theo Johnson. So still just not the best group of surrounding talent. I think that the decision making that Dart has had leaves a lot to be desired. Pretty consistently on 3rd down and on 4th down in particular, it just didn't quite. I think that he wasn't going through the reads as well as he possibly could have. There was a 4th down. I want to say it was pretty late in the game where you have a crossing route. It is like wide open the entire rep, and he's kind of rolling out right, throws it deep. It's intercepted. Ultimately, like, the interception is better than an incompletion, the end result, because it was downfield, basically an arm punt. But still, I think that he's got to have a little bit better recognition in those situations specifically. I have it written down that I'm going to sell, but I think I'm going to hold a little bit longer because I really have been impressed with a lot of the flashes. I think that he's been pretty mobile and kind of willing to use his legs a lot. I just think it's going to be a learning experience for him, becoming a little bit more, let's call it, mature in his progressions. And I just don't think he's getting a ton of help from the offensive infrastructure as a whole.
For sure. Similar with Gabriel, right? Dart's played 2 or started 2 games, I should say. He played like 5 plays in some other games on the 2024 Arch Manning package where he just takes design runs. I'm going to read off the receivers that are on the roster right now. Darius Slayton, you mentioned, got hurt. So Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, 2 guys you mentioned. Gunnar Olszewski, like a cult classic favorite around the league. And Bo Collins, who was an undrafted free agent from Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken, is on their 53-man roster. So it's not a group of world beaters like you're saying at receiver. I think Theo Johnson's been a solid like red zone target for Dart. He has a touchdown in both of the games that Dart has started, but it's tough, right? This isn't a great situation for Jaxson Dart. And we talked about that when they drafted him, that this was a team so bad in the quarterback department that they felt the need to get 2 veterans, and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and then to bench Russ after week 3. thrusting Dart in immediately. It was never going to be perfect. So I think I'm in agreement with you. I'm going to hold on Dart, and we'll have to see how the rest of the season plays out.
And it might be the toughest test that he gets on Sunday because he plays against the Denver Broncos, who have given up
Hmm.
the least amount of touchdowns in the NFL so far this season. I think they've only given up like I want to say 6 touchdowns. I could be completely wrong about that, but it's not a lot. And this team is like just loaded defensively. In so many different metrics and from a talent perspective. Yeah, so they've only given up 6 touchdowns through 5 games, which is completely nuts when you think about it.
Do you want to
Um,
guess how many sacks the Broncos have through 5 games? They're first, by the way.
through 5 games, I know Nick Benito's been getting after it. I'll say, I'll say like 17 or 18.
They have 21 sacks through five
Oh my
games.
gosh,
And
that's
that Giants
ridiculous.
line is not the best. So I'm wishing the best for Dart, but this will be
I
another
have
tough test for him.
I have another trivia just before we move on or keep talking about the Giants or that upcoming game. The Denver Broncos have given up the least amount of touchdowns with 6 through 5 games. Do you know who's given up the most touchdowns and how many it's been?
I want to say the Ravens because they've given up like 40 points per game. And I'm going to guess like, let's say the Ravens have given up 20 touchdowns. That'll be my guess.
It is the Ravens. They've given up 21 touchdowns
Ooh.
through 5 games.
And we'll be talking about the Ravens here soon. So that might be a good prelude into that.
Let's get to the last quarterback then, which is Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has played 4 games so far this year. It looked really rough against Minnesota. We even talked about it. It wasn't. There was a lot that was going wrong in that game for the Chicago Bears, particularly in the second half, or honestly after their opening game script. What are your thoughts on Caleb Williams through 4 games? Are you buying, selling? Just your overall kind of takeaways from the first part of their season.
So to start, I'm going to buy Caleb Williams. It might be a shock to buy a number one overall pick, but I think as the season has progressed, he's gotten a bit calmer in each game. That the Vikings game was very, very bad, and then following it up with the Lions, they just got blown out. So Williams had to push the ball down the field a lot. I think he had 2 interceptions in that game. But as the season has progressed, I think he's been a bit more stable. I think Ben Johnson's system is not he's not shifting it to fit Williams, but Williams is fitting into the system a lot better. Obviously, they've only played 4 games so far. They had their bye week last week as well. But I think as the season progresses, it's going to be a good match with Ben Johnson. The weapons are getting involved. I'd like to see more with some of the weapons, but I think overall it's a pretty friendly ecosystem for Caleb Williams, and I think he's going to continue to improve. I will say, I don't think he's going to be a clean quarterback like Jared Goff is, who doesn't like he rarely puts the ball in harm's way. Williams is going to make mistakes just based on the player he is as a creator, but I think the infrastructure around him in the system it won't limit those mistakes, but it'll highlight Williams's strengths even more in terms of pushing the ball down the field to where those mistakes are going to be mitigated. Like I expect him to be like above average in interceptions every year, but because he's talented enough to push the ball down the field, I think how Ben Johnson is scheming stuff up is going to work out very well for the Bears moving forward. So I'm going to buy Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy as well. I think he's gotten so much better as the season has gone along. Just from weeks 1 through 4, like he has truly turned it around from a pretty disastrous week 1. I want to talk about his passing splits for a second because when blitzed, he's kind of just dicing teams up, and I think that's kind of the mark of a young quarterback who's getting better and could potentially end up in the top 10 at some point. But when he's blitzed so far this season, he's been blitzed or has 40 attempts when blitzed, completed 26 of them. He has 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, plus 10 EPA, just incredibly efficient when he's blitzed and just dicing up the other team. And we talked before the season about how this Chicago Bears team, at least I thought that they would kind of start slow and get better and better and better as the season progresses, just because that's kind of the way that these young head coaches work, especially if they're going to be calling plays as well. Um, and I think that this Bears team has started so much better than I even expected. Obviously, they lose in week one. I think they lost in week two as well, but they bring it back with a huge victory against the Dallas Cowboys, and then they beat the Las Vegas Raiders on, I think it was a blocked kick in the final play. So this Bears team is 2-2 right now, coming off of a bye week. I could not be more excited to watch Caleb Williams, who I think has been one of the more exciting players in the NFL over the past month or so.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the game that they have on Monday night this week in a few, probably like half an hour or whenever we get to that. But I think he's been a lot better. I will say the Raiders aren't a world beater squad, right? And the Dallas Cowboys, believe they lose CeeDee Lamb in that game, and their defense as a whole isn't my favorite to watch so far. That being said, it's a huge improvement from what he was doing in week one.
Massive, massive improvement. But we're going to get to our next segment. It's so over. We're so back. We're going to dissect some teams that have either disappointed a lot, had an awful game, or maybe had a bounce back game. Kind of dissecting that pivotal moment that we think could be a turning point in each respective team's season. So, Jacob, your first team?
It is so over, and I can't believe I'm saying this in I guess we're in week 6 now. It is so over for the Baltimore Ravens. This team not only is just injured beyond belief, like all of their all pros from last year missed the game against the Houston Texans, but man, even with those guys playing, like a lot of those guys were playing in the Chiefs game after Lamar Jackson left. This team is just so bad without Lamar behind center. The offensive line is uninspiring. The defensive front without Namdi Metabwike is just very, very rough to watch. The secondary is probably the most disappointing to me because I thought that they had assembled a very talented group there between Wiggins, Kyle Hamilton, Starks, the rookie, and Marlon Humphrey, who was an all pro last year. I think that's the most disappointing part. But as you can see, the Ravens are just falling apart. One of the other things that is incredibly disappointing is Derrick Henry's play following week one. I want to read off his stats to you in every game so far. So in week one, he had the really, really good game, right? 169 yards, 2 touchdowns. He fumbled in the fourth quarter, pretty pivotal fumble. And since that fumble, 23 rushing yards in the Browns game, fumble in the fourth quarter in that one. 50 rushing yards in the Lions game and a touchdown, but he also had another fumble in the fourth quarter in that one. The Chiefs game, he had 42 rushing yards and he had 33 rushing yards against the Houston Texans this week. That was a bit tougher because they were down like instantly. So game script wise, you couldn't really use Derrick Henry, but he has fewer combined yards in those 4 games than he did in week one, like total. So very disappointing, steep drop off for Derrick Henry. I think the coaching has been an issue for some time. We talked about John Harbaugh a couple of weeks ago, but uh, I think Harbaugh's time is expiring. I don't know if he'd get fired this year, but you can see some of the decisions and just how poorly this roster is built. That also goes on Eric DaCosta, the general manager, as well. I think the defensive scheme hasn't lived up to what it was last year. And if Lamar Jackson continues to miss time, there's not a team in the league that I think the Ravens would be overwhelmingly favored against.
It really sucks because the injuries are just really stacked up for this Ravens team, but it is so over for them. They are currently the 5th worst team in terms of passing EPA allowed. They are the 2nd worst team in terms of rushing EPA allowed. In general, I would say a rule is you can be completely terrible at one aspect of defense while still being a respectable team, but you definitely can't be like bottom 5 in both, which the Ravens are. So it's really unfortunate. I thought that the talent would be kind of overwhelming this year, even if they did face injuries, but it just hasn't been. There's been a few bright spots, like Wiggins in the secondary has been pretty good. I think that Zay Flowers continues to be impressive, even if he doesn't necessarily have the production numbers to go along with it. It's just it is kind of over. Like this Ravens team, we've continued to talk about how their early season schedule is incredibly rough, and for Lamar Jackson to be missing time at this point, like their upcoming schedule, they play the LA Rams this week. They play the Chicago Bears in 2 weeks. It's just those aren't going to be gimmies of games. So I think it's going to be tough for the Baltimore Ravens to kind of claw their way back from 1-4, maybe 1-5 after this week, probably 1-5 actually. But I picked this team to win the Super Bowl. I picked Lamar Jackson to win MVP. So it certainly doesn't look good for those picks in particular. But I'm hopeful that they can become at least respectable, maybe win their way into a wild card spot. But they certainly shouldn't be viewed as the favorites, or maybe even the favorites to be the second place team in the division.
It's astounding to me. I'm looking at the odds on FanDuel now, but they're still the favorite to win the AFC
Really?
North. Yeah.
Wow.
They're at plus 105. Pittsburgh is very close at plus 115, but
That's
we touched on
crazy to
it
me.
a little bit that the Baltimore Ravens traded for Joe Flacco, or excuse me, the Cincinnati Bengals traded for Joe Flacco. It's funny, three teams in the division now have Flacco as a starter. Maybe he'll go to the Steelers next year after Rodgers retires or something. But I don't think you can count the Bengals out. Obviously, their defense isn't super great, much better than it was last year, I want to say. And as long as Flacco doesn't make the crippling mistakes that Jake Browning makes like throughout the game, I think the Bengals have a chance to win some games. And so for an improved Bengals team, a Steelers team, which far and away is the best team in the division to me, and both of those teams continuing to play well, I think it's certainly over for the Ravens' chance to win the AFC North, in my opinion. Like you said, they could be a wild card team if Lamar Jackson comes back, is healthy, puts forth another Herculean MVP season, which he did last year. He might have been covering up a lot of bad stuff last year with just how well he was playing. It wouldn't shock me if this Ravens team has a losing record at the end of the year and finds themselves picking within the top 10 of a pretty loaded NFL draft where they need help at like every single position outside the quarterback. Just for reference, and I know we're only 5 weeks into the season, they are currently third in the draft order on Tankathon.
I genuinely cannot believe that they're still the betting favorites for the AFC North. That is astounding to
Yeah,
me.
it's. I was shocked when I looked it up.
That's nuts. Let's talk about the next team. The Arizona Cardinals. It is so over. They had the maybe goofiest loss I think I've possibly ever seen. Technically, they possessed the ball with two scores of a lead with less than 5 minutes to go. How on earth do you lose that game against the Tennessee Titans of all teams, who we have talked, I think, every single week since the season started about how Brian Callahan is going to be out of there in the very near future. Um, Props to the Tennessee Titans for coming back and winning this game. Cam Ward in the fourth quarter looked really good, minus that interception that should have sealed the deal for the Cardinals. But yeah, I genuinely don't know how you lose this game, honestly. Amari DiMercado, 73-yard rush, fumbled the ball into the end zone. Second straight week, we've had a 70-plus yard play fumbled into the end zone, which I don't even know how that happens in the NFL. And then there was the Jonathan Gannon weirdness, which added to the negative vibes around this team. Kyler Murray has been pretty unimpressive so far this season. He's had a few pretty disastrous turnovers as well. He's 20th in passing EPA so far this year. And the running game from Drew Petzing and company last year was really, really efficient. And that was probably the reason why that Cardinals team scored so many points, particularly in the middle part of last season. But right now, they're 31st in rushing success rate. Their starting running back is Michael Carter, and their offensive line just isn't getting the push up front that you would really hope. So they're not exactly good via passing nor running the ball. The defense has improved. They're still pretty mid. They're 14th in EPA per play allowed. I get that they still. I'm pretty sure Walter Nolan has yet to play so far this year, and I think it is genuinely an improved defense. But I think that's only because the talent last year on that end was so bad. So I just don't feel great about this Arizona Cardinals team. You look at their 2 wins: New Orleans Saints in week 1 and the Carolina Panthers, who honestly probably should have beat them in that game.
It's over. You talked about how you had all the futures or shares in the Ravens this year in your predictions. My coach of the year prediction is probably out of the window at this point because I picked Jonathan Gannon, the Cardinals head coach. I thought that they could make a 7 seed wild card run and beat expectations. Depending on the angle that you looked at, he either shoves or punches Amari DiMercado after the 73-yard touchdown that he fumbled at the half-inch line there. And obviously, that's not acceptable. Maybe if you're a fantasy owner of DiMercado and you started him, you might think that's acceptable, but you can't go around like hitting people. Like these are
Yeah,
grown men
it's
that you're working with. This is it. Like even you're not supposed to do this in high school or college, but I could understand like put like a little bit of a shove, right? Even though you shouldn't do it, but you can't do that in the pros. These are grown men that like they have to respect you. How are they going to respect you after you put hands on one of your employees, right? That's just incredibly bad vibes, bad behavior
yeah,
from Gannon. And it's not saying that DiMercado should be excused for that play. Like you said, this is a back-to-back week where not only did we have a play like that where you have a 70-plus yard touchdown fumbled at the goal line, both of those plays win the game. A.D.
yeah,
Mitchell wins the game for the Colts, and they're undefeated if that goes in. DiMercado wins the game because this was what, like 2 minutes left in the third quarter if they score that touchdown there. And then just an epic collapse there at the end to pretty easily the worst team in the league and the Tennessee Titans. One of my takes was that Arizona would win, and they just fell apart there at the end. The touchdown, like the interception touchdown, was just so fluky that, all right, you know what? We allowed that, whatever. But then allowing Calvin Ridley, who hasn't done anything all year, who's frankly dropped a ton of passes all year, just carved them up down the field in that fourth quarter. We talked about Cam Ward playing well. Calvin Ridley won them like that last drive with multiple like 25-yard plus catches downfield. And just to allow that to happen, I don't know. It's just over for them. I am impressed with the defensive performance and upgrades, but I think losing offensive line coach Clayton Adams to the Dallas Cowboys, who's their offensive coordinator now, I think that was a huge blow. Losing James Conner for the season is a big blow. Trey Benson, who would have been the backup, is also on IR. So they have no run game to speak of. The pass game hasn't really come along, although Harrison Jr. has improved from how he started. A really phenomenal touchdown catch in this game, but it's just over for this team. And to the Clayton Adams point, he might have masked so many deficiencies that he might be getting head coaching looks in the
yeah.
upcoming cycle just based on how well the Cowboys offense is performing.
And the Cowboys' offense, if I'm not mistaken, I think they lead the NFL in both passing and rushing yards. I could be completely wrong about that. Maybe it's like Dak leads in passing yards and Javonte leads in rushing yards, something like that. But I know they lead in overall yards for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I want to read you the Arizona Cardinals' upcoming schedule, right? Because I think that until mid-December, it genuinely might be the hardest schedule in the NFL. So, this coming Sunday, they play in Indianapolis, 4-1. After that, they play against Green Bay. Then they have a bye week, followed by 2 away games, one against Dallas on Monday Night Football, followed by a game in Seattle. After that, they have a 2-game homestand against San Francisco and Jacksonville. Both of those teams are 4-1. After that, they play at Tampa Bay versus the LA Rams, and then at Houston before their final 3 games of the season. So it could get really ugly really quick for this Arizona Cardinals team if they don't figure things out quick, because that is like one of the toughest schedules in the NFL. It has to be remaining.
I agree. I think to point to the Cardinals' defense, because we're bashing them right now. they've lost all their games by like a combined 6 points. Like
Yeah.
they've been close games, but the point of this segment is this is like a point in the season that could tank your season or drastically improve your season. And I think when you have the DeMercado thing, you have one of the worst collapses I've seen in maybe half a decade. Like the Carolina one probably would have been worse because that would have been an onside kick, but just a pure collapse. The Titans had like 4 minutes to score multiple touchdowns and they did it. And then the coaching stuff on the sideline, I think this really could be the moment that sinks the Cardinals season and therefore it's over.
It sucks. It sucks. I'm hoping that they can pull it together because they have so many fun players on their team. We still haven't even seen Walter Nolan, so once he comes back, hopefully things improve defensively, especially up front. I just think that like the combination of he and Calais Campbell and some of the other pieces in that front seven could be really strong. But let's get to a little bit more positive. Who is it so back for, Jacob?
This is going to be a weird one because they've won consecutive games prior to this win, but I think it's so back for the Denver Broncos' hopes of being one of the better AFC teams, is how I would put it. They, like I said, they had already won 2 in a row. They go into Philadelphia and have a huge win over the Philadelphia Eagles. This was the Eagles' first loss of the season. Certainly, it was their first loss at home. And I think the Broncos' defense is living up to what we thought it could be after I don't want to say rough first 2 weeks, but they had the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't think they had the stopping power that we thought they did. They had 6 sacks against the Philadelphia Eagles this week. I know Jalen Hurts isn't the best escape artist, but 6 sacks is still a lot. We talked about how they have the most sacks in the league to this point. They limited Saquon Barkley to 6 carries. AJ Brown had a very quiet day as well. A lot of that was on AJ Brown himself, but they still did a good job of limiting him and ultimately get the win over Super Bowl champs. A good win. I think Philly was the number one pick in all of our top 10 rankings at the 2 point conversion going into the week. He might still be the number one pick overall. But I think Denver played a great game. I thought Bo Nix did more of what I thought, or did more of what I said that he was capable of, like being a good system operator and just keeping the offense humming to where the defense can do all the dirty work. I thought he did a good job doing that. And I think that this can be a real turning point for Denver because if I can pull up their schedule real quick, coming up, they have the Jets this week. I believe that's in London. It's an early game, so it's abroad, certainly. Then they have the Giants, the Cowboys, the Texans, the Raiders. I think their first real test again is the Kansas City Chiefs, who they'll host on November 16th. So they have an opportunity to stack a lot of wins together against some subpar offenses. Other than the Cowboys are a good offense, but their defense isn't great. I think we're back for the Broncos being one of the contenders for the AFC West.
It was so over after a few weeks, but they've really kind of brought it back a little bit. Anytime you knock off the Super Bowl champions in their own stadium, that's going to give your team a lot of confidence. And you already mentioned their upcoming schedule is really, really favorable at this point. We mentioned earlier how their defense had only allowed 6 total touchdowns through 5 games. I kind of still can't believe how ridiculous that is. But this Denver Broncos team, after a pretty rough start against Indianapolis, where they kind of allowed that team to maybe not take over, but they certainly weren't playing up to the expectations that we had for this defense specifically. They're currently 4th in overall EPA per play allowed. So the defense has certainly recovered. Excluding that game against Indianapolis, you're probably looking at the best defense in the
And,
NFL. And
and how did they lose that game too, right? It was
yeah,
on the leveraging call. And then they
right.
lose the Chargers game on Sean Payton calling go route on 3rd and 6. So they were in these games, but I think stringing wins together here, especially against the Eagles, is it's going to be their we're so back moment once we look back on it.
And you mentioned how the Cardinals had only lost 3 games by a combined 6 points. This Denver Broncos team has only lost 2 games by a combined 4 points so far. So I think it's really shaping up to be a nice start to the season for the Denver Broncos and potentially a playoff run as well. So we weekly we do the 2 point conversions top 10 rankings. And in the top 10 rankings, there were only three AFC teams. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills at number three, the Indianapolis Colts at number six, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars at number nine. So currently, the 2 point conversion has those three teams ahead of the Denver Broncos, who we have as our first team out. From a talent perspective, I think there's an argument to be made that the Denver Broncos are better than each of the Colts and Jaguars. So I think that things have shaped up well for this Broncos team. Obviously, the Colt or the not the Colts, the Chiefs haven't started very well this year. They're 2-3 and play a tough game this week. The Chargers have lost two games in a row now, so the Broncos suddenly look to be a team, even though they started 1-2, maybe the division favorites right now in the AFC West.
It's really unfortunate that the Chargers have the game up on them because they beat them there.
That's right.
But this could be, like we're talking about, this could be a Denver team that makes it through a favorable schedule, I'd say, and really pushes for the division at the end of the year.
The Washington Commanders were so back. The rushing attack between Jaden Daniels and Ja'Cory Bill Krosky Merritt. Both of those guys are like incredibly efficient on their own, and combined, they make one of the most exciting running attacks in the NFL. Last week, we kind of talked about how, despite the lack of a clear, I would say, like tertiary receiving option behind Debo Samuel, behind Terry McLaurin, that we were still pretty excited about the pass catchers like Luke McCaffrey, like Jalen Lane, and while those guys like made their impact, Luke McCaffrey specifically on just a massive 50-yard catch. Debo Samuel has really come into his own so far this year. Like he's been very, very efficient. They're going to him a lot, especially in the absence of Terry McLaurin. So the offensive line infrastructure as well, I think that it's really improved over the course of this season. And to get a win on the road against the LA Chargers team that had a true MVP candidate in Justin Herbert, right? A rookie of the year candidate in Amarian Hampton after a week where he really took over that game against the Giants. It's very, very impressive. They held this Chargers offense to only 10 points, which is really, really strong from them. So Durant Armstrong, he has 22 pressures. That's top 10 in the NFL. He's been just really good so far this year. The rookies, I think Josh Connerly already mentioned how the offensive line has improved, but Trey Amos as well as an outside corner has really been impressive so far for this Commanders team. And once they get Terry McLaurin back, I think the offense is going to be taken to another level. So, despite them kind of having some lumps early on against the Packers and especially against the Falcons 1 week prior, we're pretty back for the Washington Commanders.
I agree. They turned Justin Herbert into Eli Manning respectfully. Like he had the interception on the 1 yard line there, which is the Eli Manning classic. And they really limited the Chargers offense as a whole. I thought that they would struggle in doing that, considering, that they'd be going across the country and that the Chargers offense was just firing on all cylinders in the run, the pass game. They limited Quentin Johnston to 4 receptions for 40 yards. He also had a fumble in this game. They limited Amarian Hampton, and I know Hampton got injured in this game, but prior to that, he had 12 rushes for 44 yards, so under 4 yards per carry. Justin Herbert was their leading rusher on a couple scrambles there. They limited just every facet of the Chargers offense, other than the one touchdown drive there. And by the end of the game, Herbert wasn't benched necessarily because it was out of reach, but Trey Lance and the backups were getting reps. Like that's the way that this game was going. I think the Commanders just overall were in control. You talked about Debo Samuel. I think he's tailor-made to fit what Cliff Kingsbury wants to do. He can be kind of the like the yak guy, getting the offense going. And I think this week we're going to see like a really good test of which team is back, what quarterback is we're buying or selling going forward, because they have a pretty good opponent this week. But you got to give them credit. I think they played well. once Terry McLaurin's back, I think this team can be even better. This is a team that I had my doubts could make the playoffs or contend with the like winning the division. But if the Eagles are going to drop a couple games, maybe the Commanders can fight back and be in contention for the NFC East down the line.
The way they battled back in this game specifically, the Chargers got out to a 10-0 lead in the first quarter, and they were driving down the field to score again pretty early on. I think they got the ball all the way down to the Washington 20-yard line before a fumble, which is a massive, massive swing in this game. The Commanders then scored an immediate touchdown, 9-play, 74-yard drive. So even in a pretty negative game script immediately for this Washington team, they turned it around, was able to battle back and win against the Chargers team that, plays really stout defense under Jesse Minner. I think he's been one of the more impressive coordinators, not only this season, but last season as well. They battled back. They won. It's a massive, massive win for a Commanders team that really needed it. Their upcoming schedule, not kind, but we'll see if they can kind of continue it. I think that they've proven themselves to be maybe not a one-year wonder, but certainly more than that at this point.
You talk about their schedule. Their game this week is my game of the week pick. It is Monday night. I think we have 2 Monday night games again, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it is what it is. The first game is Bills at the Atlanta Falcons. Like Penix will get a chance to prove himself again. But the second game is Chicago traveling to Washington for a huge rematch last year. If you recall, last year the Bears got out to a 4-2 start on their season. Like they were beating up on some team, like they beat the Rams when they were bad. They beat the Panthers with Andy Dalton. They beat the Titans. Like they looked to be off to a hot start, and then it all changed when they played Washington and lost on the Hail Mary. And then Chicago would lose, I think, 10 in a row before they win their last game of the season. It was a huge swing. It was like the beginning of the downturn for Caleb Williams. There's going to be a huge revenge game for Caleb Williams for that reason. It's going to be a pretty big revenge game for Ben Johnson as well. If you recall, I believe it was the Commanders that knocked the Lions out of the playoffs, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
right. Yeah.
So revenge game on 2 fronts there. I thought Washington was pretty good against the Chargers, like we talked about, and they're going to have to continue it against a Chicago team that is coming off of their bye. And I don't know, it's just like it's the perfect script that it's going to be a night game traveling to Washington. You remember Tyreek Stevenson was talking to the fans before the interception there, or not interception, excuse me, the Hail Mary. So I don't know. This just screams like a really good matchup to me.
When I sent you the sheet for today's podcast, I saw that the first thing you entered was this game for your game of the week, and I think it's going to be a good one. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. I think both of these offenses are going to be really fun to watch. Maybe the Commanders a little bit more than the Bears, but I think that it's going to be a high-scoring game, and like you said, the narratives around this game, considering what happened in the last matchup and considering Ben Johnson's final game in Detroit, is really going to amplify a lot of, I guess, the discourse of how this game is, looked back upon at the end of the season. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I certainly hope it ends in a similar fashion to last year's edition, but I'm not getting my hopes up for that, obviously. I think Washington, I have to give them the edge. They're more experienced. They've got a lot older of a team, for better or for worse. And I just think that they're a little bit better well-rounded on both sides of the ball. Like this Bears team cannot run the ball at all. And I know it's driving Ben Johnson insane. I bet that he wishes he could have traded up one more spot for Trevion Henderson, who hasn't really gotten much of an opportunity in New England. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a pretty big bounce back game for Jaden Daniels as well, who, we've mentioned how he's had a pretty rough start, didn't look great against Green Bay, and then obviously was injured after that. But I think this is potentially a get right game for him. And then, I just think that I have to give the Commanders a slight edge. I see that they're favored by 4.5 points. I don't love it being that heavily in their favor, but they are at home. It is a Monday night game, so we'll see. But I'm going to take Washington here.
I've gone back and forth every day. Like in our game predictions, I've changed that game so many times. I think I have Chicago in there right now just because there's so much on the line for Chicago that like this is a true litmus test for them. If Caleb Williams has really improved since week one, if Ben Johnson is really like the schematic guy that he's been hyped up to be for so many years. You mentioned the run game for Chicago. And one of my notes here is that I think Washington's defensive front has the advantage in that matchup there, not only in the run game, but in the pass game. You mentioned Dorrance Armstrong, top 10 in pressure so far this year. The front for Chicago, the interior offensive line, which they overhauled, has not lived up to the overhaul and the investment so far. Maybe a bye week will help in that department, but I think Washington's defensive front can make some stuff difficult for Caleb Williams, which if there's a thing that he's still struggled with, it's like once the pressure hits, it's he's looking to get outside and make stuff happen still, even though some stuff might be open within structure. I will say as well the rushing part of the equation for the Bears. They had an opportunity in the draft to get a running back at pick 10. They obviously go with Colston Loveland instead of Omarion Hampton, who I believe both of us had in various mock drafts that we mocked Omarion Hampton to them. I wonder how involved Loveland will be or how involved Luther Burden will be. Maybe they can give some design rushes to Burden to get that stuff going. But I think it's going to be very interesting. Right now, I think I'm going to lean Chicago just because they have, to me, they have to win this one to make a mark on their season. But I could see myself changing it 2 or 3 more times by the time we get to the game on Monday night. But hopefully it is a banger.
I see a lot of people counting out this Bears draft class so far this year. Um, and I bet they do wish they got their running back in with one of their first 4 picks, probably, whether it was Trevion Henderson. Obviously, they passed on Caleb Johnson a few times. Maybe they wish they could have gotten somebody else, maybe Judkins potentially. But I do want to, like, I think that there's a lot of potential with the guys that they did take. Obviously, Loveland hasn't been super impressive, but especially like you stack it up compared to Tyler Warren, what he's done so far for the Colts, and it's night and day. Loveland is also like 2 years younger than Warren. I think he's got a lot of potential, and tight ends take notoriously long to develop. And Luther Burden was always going to be buried behind these receivers, DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, and they love Olamide Zaccheaus as well there. And then the other 2 guys being kind of more depth linemen. I think it's just hard to get those guys involved early on, but certainly maybe not the results that you would want early on for your rookie class, especially when you see what Sam Laporta did for Ben Johnson in his rookie year. But yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting to see whether he can get involved, because I think that this Washington Commanders defense is particularly slow in the middle of the field and their ability to guard tight ends. So it could be a game where he does get more involved than he has previously, because I don't think he's done all of that much for the Commanders so far, or for the Bears so far this season. I'm not sure if I think he does have a catch, but if he does, it's like 1 or 2 probably.
I bet that they were just hoping for Genty to make it to him. That like that would have been a
Yeah,
perfect match. And once that didn't happen, I don't want to say they were scrambling because I feel like it's very deliberate to take somebody like Colston Loveland with the 10th overall pick, but
right.
it's such a
They seem
disappointment that they weren't able to get a running back.
they seemed really excited to get him based off of the clips that they were posting on
Yeah.
draft night.
Well, I
So
mean, to be every team is excited, in the first round, but
yeah,
I think it was very deliberate that they went after Loveland, and it is disappointing when you compare them because they're always going to be compared.
yeah,
When you compare him to
yeah.
Tyler Warren, who was picked 4 picks later, so hopefully he can get involved early in this game or early in the season. But yeah, that's certainly an area or a pick that I think is going to be questioned if Loveland doesn't get involved.
Let's talk about another game of the week. I have the Seattle Seahawks at the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am super excited about this game. Travis Hunter really impressed in the few reps that he did get on Monday. Obviously, that massive, I think it was a 40-yard downfield contested grab over two different guys. Really, really fun player. I hope he gets more reps on offense. I continue to say it, and I will probably say it every single week until he's a full-time offensive player. But I'm very excited about him. Brian Thomas Jr. had a catch where I think it was good to see him get right a little bit after just a really weird start to the season. But this Seahawks defense versus Jacksonville Jaguars offense is going to be like must watch to me. You've got so many dudes on both sides here. Um, Obviously, the Jaguars lose Brenton Strange. I think he was immediately placed on IR this year. But I talked about that screen efficiency metric that I posted on Twitter several minutes ago. But the Jacksonville Jaguars have actually run the most screens. So we talked about how the Falcons had only run 9 screens so far this season. The Jaguars have run 31 screens so far. And I think that it's kind of indicative of how Liam Cohen wants this offense to function, taking advantage of open space, getting it to playmakers. I'm kind of shocked that they haven't run more of those to Travis Hunter specifically. But I think that they're going to get him more involved in that aspect as well. And for a team that has a new head coach, has a new play caller, a new offense, new everything, I just continue to think that they're going to become more and more efficient in that specific area. On the other side, you have Sam Darnold, who's looked shockingly good this year. I think he's playing even better than how he did in Minnesota last year. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who would probably be an all-pro at this point if the season ended today, and a running game that's just very exciting between two guys, Zach Charbonnet and Kenny Walker, who fill very different roles. I'm really interested to watch Trevor Lawrence specifically against the Seattle defense, which is very stout. Lawrence, it looked like his brain was made of rocks on Monday night. There were just so many mistakes that he probably shouldn't be making. Throws beyond the line of scrimmage, sacks that he needs to throw out of bounds. Just lots of rookie mistakes, I'll call it, like first game rookie mistakes. And for a guy that's in year 5, year 6, it's something that I'm like cautiously looking at. I think Liam Cohen will, rein him in eventually, but there is some weirdness there, I think. But the Seattle Seahawks team versus Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm very optimistic that this can be just a really fun football game.
I'm hopeful. I don't think we're going to get the throwback uniforms for either team, which
No,
looked great. The game that we talked about last week, Tampa and Seattle, one of the best uniform matchups I've seen in quite some time. And then the Jaguars had the old Jaguars jerseys on, which are infinitely better than what they have now, which is kind of like if you drag their jersey like on Microsoft Paint or something and use the dropper tool, you just drop in one of the colors. That's kind of how their jerseys are now. But on the field, like the play, this should be a very, very fun game. I think Seattle's defense is one of, if not a top 3 defense in the league, right? With Denver, who we talked about. I think Houston is still really, really stout. And then Seattle is right there for me. Sam Darnold, genuinely incredible so far. Playing like a top 10 quarterback, dare I say it. And I think he's evolved since going to the 49ers in Minnesota. I think he's much more competent. I don't really blame that interception at the end of the game on him. It was somebody's hand tipped it, and it went off of somebody's helmet into, I think Levante David got the interception there. I think it's going to be a very, very fun game. I'm going to give the edge to Seattle. I think they're just more talented, and it sounds so weird to say that Sam Darnold is playing much more competent and explosive football than Trevor Lawrence. If you would have told me that like 3 years ago when the Jaguars were in the playoffs, I would have told you you're out of your mind. But it's funny how the NFL works. One thing I will note is Seattle, along with a lot of other West Coast teams, the Rams, the Chargers, and the Arizona Cardinals are all traveling to the East. Well, the Cardinals are going to Indy, but the other three teams are going to the East Coast to play 1 p.m. games or noon games in Central Time. So 10 a.m. body clock games for those teams. But I still think Seattle's talented enough to be able to deal with that. I think Mike McDonald has done a phenomenal job turning this team around. And it sucks that they lost against Tampa Bay, but I think Seattle's one of the better teams in the NFC. And I think that they'll get the win this week.
I'm also going to go with Seattle here. I just think that they have a more well-rounded team. I think they have things figured out more on defense than Jacksonville does on offense. And I think Seattle's better than what their record says. I mean, they are currently 3-2. Their 2 losses are against San Francisco in week 1 and then Tampa Bay this past week. Honestly, that Tampa game, they probably should have won if it wasn't for that interception. So I just think that they're a really, really strong team in an NFC conference that continues to be loaded. Jacksonville, they're 4-1, feels a little bit fluky, right? They have wins against the Houston Texans, 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously the Panthers in week 1 as well. So really those last 3 games could have gone either way against Houston, San Fran, and Kansas City. But for them to have wins against the 49ers and the Chiefs specifically this early in the season, I think it goes to show you the level of coach that Liam Cohen has been so far. As a rookie coach, as somebody that's installing a new offense, there is a lot of turnover luck here. Like, I think this team continues to lead the NFL in overall turnovers generated, but still very impressive nonetheless. Like, there was a like 99-yard interception return touchdown from Devin Lloyd in this game. I think there continues to be a level of luck there that isn't going to sustain itself over the course of the season.
I have to agree with you. Again, though, I didn't think Liam Cohen could revitalize the run offense. That was like one of my big hangups about this Jaguars team, but he's done an incredible job just turning the overall offense around. And I think the more he and Trevor Lawrence get to know each other throughout the season, like with real game action, I think some of those brain made of rocks mistakes, as you so eloquently put it, will be minimized.
With that, we're going to get to our final segment. Grade that take. So, Jacob, I see you have a pair of college takes here. We didn't talk too much about college football in this podcast, but we will get back to it soon. Jacob, what is your first take that you have?
So there are quite a few high-profile games this week in the college football landscape. Alabama going to Missouri, both are top 15 teams. Ohio State, Illinois. Ohio State should probably win that one pretty easily. LSU, South Carolina, revenge game? Question mark for your South Carolina
We're not
Gamecocks.
going to. I'm not holding my breath for that one.
I don't Nussmeier will give you a chance. I'll say that. And then Michigan USC, I think, is also pretty important rivalry game. But the two I want to touch on, the first one in this take is going to be the Red River rivalry, and that is Oklahoma and Texas. My take is that Oklahoma is going to win this game no matter who is at quarterback. If John Mateer is back, great. They're going to win. If it's a backup, I think Michael Hawkins is the backup. They're still going to win. And I have a couple pieces why. Number one, Arch Manning hasn't really lived up to the expectations, and I want to give him some grace because there's like a weird hit piece out about Arch Manning from The Athletic, I believe, that dropped on Monday, if I'm not, maybe it was yesterday on Tuesday, as we record on a Wednesday night here, but very weird piece saying, I think the title was, "Is Arch Manning college football's first failure?" Which is just odd to me when news publications are the ones propping up the expectations for him, right? Arch himself has been pretty humble throughout the process. It's been everyone around him kind of boosting the expectations. And for one piece of the media to build him up and then tear him down, not even, well, I guess it's halfway into the season now, just kind of an odd perspective there. Regardless, I don't think Arch has lived up to the hype that was created for him. He struggled mightily against Florida, and Florida has a pretty good defense, but Oklahoma's defensive front is much, much better. I think their D line is one of the best in the country. They just rack up sacks against, or not inefficient, but indecisive quarterbacks, like against Auburn. I think they had 10 sacks. Against Texas A&M, they had quite a few sacks. And Arch is indecisive if he's anything. So I think the Oklahoma defensive line is going to eat. And I think that it's going to be hard to gimmick the offense for Arch Manning. I think Arch is going to, or excuse me, Steve Sarkisian, the head coach and play caller, I think he's going to have to design a more traditional offense if they're going to be dealing with constant pressure. Like, you can't really gimmick it against good defenses, and Oklahoma has one of the best. So I think OU wins Red River. I think if John Mateer's back, that's going to be a big staple for him. If he has like a Heisman campaign or anything, it's going to be a very quick turnaround. If Mateer's back, that would only be 2 weeks that he misses with the injury to his thumb and his throwing hand. But I still think no matter who the quarterback is, Oklahoma should win. They're favored now, by the way. Texas opened up 5.5 point favorite, and now Oklahoma is favored.
Oklahoma should win this game. I think they're the better team. I think they have the better quarterback so long as Mateer is back. So I'm going to give this an A. I just don't think that Texas is going to be able to keep up with OU, assuming Mateer is back. And just from an overall talent perspective, I think Texas has really disappointed this year so far, particularly Arch Manning, despite some of the weirdness around that article from The Athletic this week. That was a little I think maybe uncalled for in a
Yeah.
way. That, like, I get it's reporting, I get it. I just think that it's really odd to kick a player while he's down when it's not really even his fault, to be honest. So I get it. Like, he's really disappointed so far this year. I think a lot of the hype, like, it's not his fault. He was the most hyped quarterback we've seen in a very, very long time. And certainly, especially, like, he was playing behind Quinn Ewers. It's not like there was at least some question marks about it. So it's just weird to me. A lot of the narratives around him. I feel bad in a way for Arch Manning.
For sure. Yeah, they didn't do, or his camp, I should say, didn't do anything to alleviate the hype, and
No.
for good reason, right? Like, you want to hype your player up, in many cases your nephew up from some of the great quarterbacks that have played in our league, in the NFL, I should say. But it's just very weird and unfortunate, the landscape based around Arch Manning. When, like, this was a guy that a lot of people, I think myself, I think you included, said that he was probably going to stay multiple years in college. So, like, this isn't his last shot or anything. I think he's going to take time to become an NFL caliber quarterback, I should say. And to your point, it's not just Arch Manning's fault. Like, Texas as a whole was the number one team coming into the year, and as a whole, the offense, which falls under the head coach's purview, has taken a nosedive. And, like, a lot of that is Sarkisian's fault, and the offensive line is all new and all that stuff. So you can't pin it all on Arch.
He actually kind of reminds me a little bit of Oklahoma Spencer Rattler, where there's a lot of hype going. Like, I think he was the Heisman favorite that year that he was replaced by Caleb Williams, if
Yeah,
I'm not
going into the
mistaken.
year, because
And he just,
that was following the run of, like, Baker, Kyler, Jalen
yeah,
Hurts, who Hurts didn't win it, but he was second, I think. And then, yeah, just comes to Rattler, and sometimes expectations are erroneously placed, or they're placed too
yeah,
high when there's not a lot of data to back that up. I think that's how it was with Arch too, right? Like, Arch
yeah,
didn't play in any of the like, how do I, like, the circuits, the camps when he was a recruit. He sat for a couple of years behind Ewers. There were, like, we didn't need to anoint him the Heisman favorite, but
no.
a lot of people did, and I just think it's unfair to call him the Heisman favorite and then take that away from him when other people were the ones building that up.
Right. Yeah. It's and with, like, the Rattler example, he found a way to become an NFL starter somehow, some way. It's not like Spencer Rattler. Yes, he was disappointing in the sense that he didn't live up to the expectations at Oklahoma. Still ended up starting 2 years in the SEC, played very well, played his way onto an NFL roster. So it's not like it's completely a lost cause for Arch Manning. He's going to get his opportunities. It might be at Texas next year, it might be elsewhere, but I do think that it's not over for him completely. Like there's so many instances of quarterbacks having a disappointing start to their college career and still finding their way into the first 2-3 rounds of the NFL draft. So I don't want to say it's over for him, but it's definitely not the start that we were seeking. So yeah, I think OU wins this. I'm gonna give this an A. Jacob, let's do your second take and keep all the college stuff together.
Sure. The last game that I didn't mention in the really fun college football slate this week is number 7 Indiana going to number 3 Oregon. Both of these teams had bye weeks this last week, and my take is that Dante Moore, Oregon's quarterback, is going to win what I guess we can call the QB1 Bowl. I think both Dante Moore and Indiana's Fernando Mendoza are maybe favorites to go first overall, to be the first quarterback taken in the draft. And I think Dante Moore's Oregon Ducks will win this game and kind of cement him as the favorite, perhaps, in that regard. This is going to be the first real ranked test for Indiana. And I say real because they played a top 10 Illinois team that had a bunch of defensive backs injured. They played against Iowa a week later, and Mendoza looked a little bit worse than how he looked the first 4 games of his season, although I think he played fairly well in that game. I question if Mendoza can operate at such high efficiency when he's sped up, and I think the Oregon defense in particular is going to speed him up. Their defense is probably the best that he's going to face all year until they play. Well, they're probably even better than Penn State. Mateo Uiagalelei for Oregon, one of the best edge rushers in the country. So I have questions about that, and then I want to see how Dante Moore performs off the bye week. He won the whiteout in Penn State, phenomenal game. And I want to see if he can follow that up with another ranked win. So I think I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks here. How excited are you for this game as somebody who's probably the champion of the Dante Moore QB1 fan club?
Yeah, I guess I was a few weeks early to saying that he would be like first round consideration. I'm very excited. I think that it's a real test for both quarterbacks. Both of these teams ranked top 10 at the current moment. Um, I'm going to give this take. I think you said Oregon's going to win. I'm going to give this an A. I just think that they're the much more talented team. I think Indiana. It feels like a very. I don't want to say it because they're like a Big Ten team. They're 5-0. It feels like a fake 5-0 or a fake like number 7 ranking before they get their first like ball don't lie type
You
of
can
game
say it feels
against
like Penn
Oregon.
State. You can say that.
Yeah, it really does. Where it's the rating is kind of inflated because they're one of the bigger 2 conference teams that is undefeated right now. So obviously they're going to get a top 10, top 15 ranking. So they were in the playoff last year. I think Oregon wins this game. You mentioned Mateo Uiagalelei. They also have Maury Washington, who's been one of the best defensive tackles in college football so far this year. So it's going to be a really tough test for Fernando Mendoza. But I think that Dante Moore is also built slightly better for the college game, especially with this Oregon offense and the weapons that they have. So I think Oregon wins. I don't really think it's particularly close either. I think the spread, let me see, Oregon's favored by 7.5 at home. I think they win by much more than that.
I'm going to agree with that. Could we be on Kenyon Sadiq watch as well, the Oregon tight end in this game?
Look, I mean, I drafted him in the top 10 of our mock draft a week ago. I think he's a very, very talented tight end. Um, Possibly the first pass catcher taken in the 2026 draft. We'll see how things continue and progress throughout the season. But yeah, we'll see. I just think that we're going to get a lot of questions answered about these 2 quarterbacks in this game for sure, though.
Yeah, and on a full team note with these 2 teams, like with Texas, I don't expect them to be in the playoff anymore, to be frank. But these 2 teams, I think both will end up in the college football playoff.
I think so as well. I think that I'm looking at Indiana's schedule, and after Oregon, they don't have a single ranked team on their schedule. They've got, I think, Penn State. who just lost to UCLA. They have UCLA on their schedule as well. I don't know if you saw, but it was like the first time that UCLA coach had called plays before.
Really?
Um, I think he was a former player too. So that's kind of embarrassing if you're Penn State, and honestly might be the reason that I don't think he'll be fired, James Franklin, but um, certainly he's going to be on the hot seat going into 2026. I think he just signed a contract extension, luckily for him. But um, let's move on to the final two takes that I had. These are more NFL centric. I think the Chiefs folded 2-4. They desperately miss Rashee Rice. He's going to be back next week, hopefully, back at full strength. It's been a very, very long time since we've seen Rashee Rice, but the Lions have been rolling since week 2. They've been winning and winning very comfortably. And this Chiefs team just does not look like the same team that they've been in the past. Chris Jones, it was just a real lack of effort on that last play against the Jaguars. I don't know if you get the same feeling here, but it does not feel like the same Chiefs team that had. When you went up against the Chiefs over the past 5 years, it's almost like there was an impending sense of doom for whoever was playing against them. I don't really get that feeling anymore, and especially this year where they start 2-3, they've looked pretty unimpressive. Um, Chiefs also currently just suck at defending the run, and it feels like a game where Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery could really get things going, kind of like how they did against the Baltimore Ravens. And I just think that the Chiefs could really fall behind, and they just don't have the talent to match up against the Lions.
This is an A plus. This is going to be another please save us Patrick Mahomes game. Even or not last night, 2 nights ago, it was a game similar to that. Outside of the pick six there from Mahomes, he was doing everything for the offense. He had a rushing touchdown. I don't think he was their rush leader, but he had quite a few carries. This Lions team is just phenomenal. Their offense is very, very hard to stop. The only team that's done it have been the Packers, and you could like chalk part of that up to it being week 1. I know there's always some week 1 weirdness, but since then, you mentioned it, the Lions have been on a roll. Nobody's really slowed them down, and I certainly don't think that the Chiefs defense right now has the manpower and the talent to slow this Lions team down. Like this could be a 10 plus point win in my opinion. I wouldn't be mad if that were your take instead, but I'm going to go A plus. I just don't think the Chiefs have enough in them to defeat the Lions here. And for the Chiefs going forward, I don't think they have nearly as many tough games down the stretch outside of division games, and they probably play the Bills as well. But a 2-4 start would be not very great compared to the Broncos, who are 3-2, who look to play the Jets this week, the Chargers, who are 3-2, who are playing, I believe, Miami this week. So it's going to be rough, but I do think they will lose. And I think I said A plus for this take, but that's why I'm grading it.
Kansas City, by the way, is favored in this game actually by 2.5 points. That's really
It's
surprising to me.
it's in Kansas City, I believe, and I
Yeah,
feel like the general home field advantage is 2.5 points. And even to that point, I think that'd be disrespectful to the Lions. I think they have the advantage in this one.
I agree. It's on Sunday Night Football. Actually, I think a really exciting NFL slate. Like we haven't mentioned all of the NFL games this week, but Thursday Night Football, you have Eagles Giants. I mean, it's kind of slop to me a little bit, but you have the Cowboys Panthers fireworks potentially. We'll see. Seahawks Jags, we talked about. The Bengals Packers, if Joe Burrow is playing, would be probably game of the week. Instead, we don't really get that. 49ers Bucks, we did not talk about at all. Incredibly exciting matchup. And then we mentioned Lions Chiefs, the Bears Commanders, Bills Falcons could be sneaky interesting as well. So just a really really good slate. My second take actually revolves around that Bengals and Packers game. I think Matthew Golden arrives this week. I think it's we're going to get 125 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the Bengals. So a pretty bold take, we'll say. His usage has increased every single week this year, and I feel like he's been missed on like every single deep ball except for that one against Dallas early in that game. The Bengals are terrible on defense. They are the seventh worst team in terms of EPA per dropback allowed. And Jordan Love last year had the second most yards on 20 plus air yard throws. So far this year, he's lagged behind in that metric. So I think we're due for a, let's call it a stat correction game.
Man, that's just such a hard threshold to
It's a high
pass.
bar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say C. I would love to see it happen, but to the point, or to this point, I should say, Jordan Love just hasn't been able to consistently hit golden on those downfield passes. And to be frank, a lot of those passes just haven't been covered or have been poor coverage, and he's just missed them. I would love to see this happen. The Packers are coming off of a bye week, if I'm not mistaken, so maybe in the off week they've worked on that a little bit, but I think I gotta say C. I mean, it's just so tough to go for 125 and 2 touchdowns, but
It's bold. Yeah. It's bold.
against, if there were going to be a defense that allows it, I guess the Bengals would be one of those defenses. One of the things that I guess we haven't mentioned so far is the only team that's defeated the Packers. I say defeated because unfortunately they still allow ties in the NFL, and they tied with the Cowboys. But the only team that defeated them were the Cleveland Browns. And if you recall, the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns at the time was Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco is slated to start for the Bengals. Do you think that has anything or any bearing on this game whatsoever, or do you think the Packers should be overwhelming favorites? I should note as well, the Bengals or the Browns defense is so much better than the Bengals.
I get that Joe Flacco is like, he's been in the NFL for 20 years, something like that at this point. I just don't know how much preparation he can do in 6 days for an NFL game with a brand new team, new play caller. There's so much that he has to learn in terms of just the basics of a brand new offense, that I'm it's not like a situation either where there's familiarity with players or with the play caller at all. To my knowledge, they're like, Joe Flacco has never been under Zach Taylor or somebody in Zach Taylor's tree. So I don't I'm not optimistic this week, at least, about the Joe Flacco led Cincinnati Bengals. Um, I think maybe they should have maybe waited another week before throwing Flacco out there, but Joe Flacco continues to accidentally become important at work.
What's there to learn in the offense about throw it to Jamar Chase or throw it to T Higgins, you know?
Yeah.
But I genuinely think they're starting him because number one, Jake Browning is just the worst QB in the league.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like catastrophically. It's like if you had Bryce Young's early, like first quarter turnovers throughout the game, and then you don't get the Bryce Young comeback parts. Like that's
Right.
how Browning has played so far. And I also genuinely think they're starting him because he already played the Packers, so he knows the defense a little bit. So that might help in that regard. But I also think that the Packers should win this one pretty handily.
They just need to let Joe Flacco retire, man. Like
Now they
they
got to sign
keep
him to the Steelers next year so he can do all
Yeah.
four.
Oh man, Joe Flacco. I feel bad for him in one sense, but at least he's making his money this year. But I think that's going to do it for our Week 6 preview. We've covered a lot today, buying and selling some young quarterbacks, new segment, It's So Over, We're So Back, some games of the week, some takes. Jacob, do you have anything you want to plug or talk about before we get out of here?
I think we'll have more QB1 talk about the draft following this week's game. So I would
For
keep
sure.
my eye on that.
Absolutely. You can follow the show at 2P_conversion on Twitter. You can follow it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on Twitter if you're watching live. I know there's many people watching at the current moment, so it means a lot for you guys to follow us, help us grow, that sort of thing. You can subscribe to our website/newsletter at 2pointconversion.com. We're going to be back at some point to review Week 6. And with that, we're going to get out of here. You can follow Jacob at Jacob Acquire, myself at dj.png. So with